This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And John, as you know, one of our fine sponsors at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network is Detroit City Sports. That is DC Sports at Lakeside Mall in Sterling Heights. And you can follow DC Sports for news about all of their authentic sports memorabilia on Twitter at DC Sports Detroit. And also, make sure to check out their terrific website at DetroitCitySports.com. And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. And John, we have time to discuss a lot of trade deadline or rumors regarding the Tigers, as three guys might be dealt, and they are Shane Greene, Nick Castellanos, and Matthew Boyd.
July 31st, Vito, a big day in Major League Baseball. This year's different in that in years past, there was this supplemental thing going on where in August you could waive somebody, and if they cleared waivers, then you could make the move. Obviously, everybody in Detroit remembers Justin Verlander at the end of August, at the very last second, was traded to Houston. No more. In Major League Baseball, now there's one deadline, July 31st, and I think the Mets and the Blue Jays kicked it all off with that whole Marcus Stroman trade. And I found that whole trade to be interesting, Vito, in that both sides, the Blue Jays and the Mets, both sides are like, what the hell? What's going on? And I do think that potentially the market has been set, and the Tigers are also part of it, and many people are going to be calling and clamoring, and it's going to be all upon Al Avila, general manager, to decide exactly what he should take, what's the lowest that he's willing to take, because these general managers are negotiating tough with the Detroit Tigers, and the Tigers are in a tough spot because of the fact that Boyd's a good pitcher. He's under team control. He's solid, but he's not good enough to command what the reported asking price has been. So you got to find a way to actually make moves. And Al Avila, his number one job is going to be to improve this team. And you have to improve this team by making trades. And early on, the early reports on the trades that he has made haven't been that great. So I do think that this trade cycle is super important because of the perception that Al Avila has as kind of being a passive general manager. I think it's really important that even if you don't trade Boyd, that if you can potentially package a Nick Castellanos and a Shane Greene to go out there and bring value back to the team, bring hitters, bring positional players that can contribute. Because prior to this recording, prior to the Tigers' win versus the Angels, they had a tumultuous, terrible week, and it sparked off debates, and it drew comparisons to potentially the Tigers being not only the worst team in the American League history, but potentially the worst team collectively in baseball history should they go over 120 losses. But I don't think that's eventually going to happen. We'll talk about that. But at this trade deadline, July 31st, the number one guy, the number one person that has to do the best job is Al Avila. Come on, Al, you got to do the job.
A lot of pressures on him. Really quick, as a side point, you mentioned how they could set the record for Major League Baseball losses in a season and ineptitude, right, from a ball club in a season. I already witnessed 03 as a youngster. I mean, God, you can't do this to me, Tigers. You were my first love, still my only love. You can't do that to me, man. I mean, what if they lost 119 or 115 at least again? That would just torment me. There's so much pain. I mean, so many Tigers fans who grew up with them, like, around my age, John, that saw no winning whatsoever until 06. And now you're going to do this to me again? I thought we already went through our little tough times, tumultuous times. And now you're going to do it to me again, maybe? Come on. So the thing is now, to make me happy, make some trades. Al Avila, the onus is on him to deal, I say, two of these three guys. I would love to see, I'm going to say this really quick, John. I would love to see Matthew Boyd dealt. Problem for him is the market value he currently possesses isn't as high as Al Avila has deemed it, based on reports, such as this latest one, an hour ago as of our recording on Tuesday, John, from John Morosi from MLB Network, MLB.com. He said Astros showing continued interest in Tigers' left-handed pitcher Matthew Boyd. Detroit has asked for Astros' top outfield prospect, top prospect in their farm system, Kyle Tucker, in the past. acquisition cost on Mets right-handed pitcher Zach Wheeler would be lower for Houston. And there is substance to those Houston-New York Mets talks, as Ken Rosenthal has reported. That's the latest on the Matthew Boyd market. So his trade value isn't nearly as high as Al Avila has deemed it to be based on that report and previous reports. And the reason why the Tigers more than likely, John, are not going to get what they're asking for Matthew Boyd is because he's never had a terrific campaign like he has had thus far this season. Never before in his major league career. You look at his numbers across the board, an ERA currently below 4. That's great. FIP even better, which really showcases how good he truly has been this season, John. And that's at below 3.5. It's a 3.47 fielding independent pitching mark. So truly, he's had a stellar season, his best season as a major leaguer. The problem is, he's never had an ERA or FIP close to this season. So that limits his trade value. And because of that, more than likely, the Tigers are not going to be able to deal him and get what they are seeking in return for his services.
And when you read the reports, the beat writers that cover the team every day, they're starting to say that the likelihood of trading Boyd is pretty dim.
It is.
It's pretty slim.
Like Fennick told us, too, when I talked to him for this podcast.
No doubt about it. And I think that when you look at it, fine. Okay, you're not going to get value for Boyd. You can maybe trade him in the offseason or trade him next year. Fine, because you got team control, and we can debate, and we have debated whether it's the right move or wrong move. But do you think it's true? Do you believe that, to the detriment of the Tigers, that Al Avila has been way too passive? Because remember, who was the general manager prior to Al Avila? The guy that was known as quote-unquote Trader Dave. And this guy would, just create trades out of nowhere, and eventually speaking, he won some, lost some, but he was a guy that made moves. So across the league, I wonder, and people are now starting to speculate, does Al Avila have relationships with these general managers where he can actually pull off a trade? Because if you're going out there and you're asking for A+, and they don't give it to you, fine. But A might not sound bad either if there's a secondary guy or a guy that you can target that can make your team and ball club better. You don't have to wait for the perfect trade in order to deal Matthew Boyd. You can get talent. You can work with other general managers if you have those relationships. It just seems like with Al Avila, in the moves that he's made, it seems like, okay, it's either all or nothing, or, hey, this is the target we want, and if we don't get it, then, hey, we're not making the move. And I do think it's incumbent upon him to make these moves, to be creative, to not just say, well, the offers were too low. Well, maybe package a Shane Greene with a Boyd and spice it up a little bit. Maybe go out there and get that number one prospect from the Houston Astros. Make it happen is eventually the name of the game in sports. You could come up with a myriad of excuses. At the end of the day, this Tiger team needs help in many ways, and it's Al Avila's job to go out and get it done. So I hope he does, at least with the moves that he can make. I do expect a couple, and maybe just, when you look at it, I do hope that there is actually a market for Shane Greene and Nick Castellanos, because we're assuming that's going to take place at this point in time. It's very important to look at the return as well, and that's the job of a general manager, is to go out there and make the moves and actually, be a little bit creative, make a move that potentially could help the team in the future.
Here's the reason why you don't deal Matthew Boyd, though. Something that my brother and I have talked about, and we actually agreed upon something, which we rarely ever do, as we rarely ever did on this podcast, too. Now he's got a full-time gig, so he can't come on here and join us as much. But this is a guy, once again, who has rebelled against my dad and I for many years, a non-Tigers fan, and we agreed upon something regarding Matthew Boyd, and that is, John, that keep him, because what if, think about this, John, and everybody out there that wants to trade him so badly, what if Matthew Boyd continues at this stellar rate going into next season and future seasons until he hits free agency in 2023? Well, if that does occur, guess what happens to his trade value? It increases a lot. Then you can start getting these A players that you're seeking right now for his services that you can't land right now because he hasn't proven it. Doesn't have the proven track record of high-level success. This year being his first season of really a lot of success garnered at the major league level. So you keep him, and maybe you trade him at next year's deadline. They're going to be crappy next year. They're going to continue to be crappy and sucky for the foreseeable future. Thus, they're going to continue being in a rebuilding mode for a while still. Another 2 to 3 years, right? At the very least. So why don't you wait it out with Matthew Boyd, see how much value he can continue to garner through more and more success in next year and beyond, then you deal him at a future deadline, and then you get what you're really seeking for his services.
Is there a player that's off the radar, not in the big three, that potentially could be traded. A lot of talk, some clamoring, some minor rumors that maybe Buck Farmer could be in the mix and be traded as well. If it's not Greene, Castellanos, or Boyd, is there anybody else that potentially could be a surprise trade on July 31st?
Buck, I've heard about him. Also, how about Joe Jimenez, who hasn't pitched that great this year, but they might see his upside. He can throw fast. He's still young, could still become a big go-to high-end reliever one day because of his youth. So there could be a team that seeks him in a trade, but guess what? If the Tigers deal Joe Jimenez right now, guess what they're getting in return for him? Diddly squat, because he has stunk it up to this point in the Major League campaign. So what you're going to get for these guys, even a Buck Farmer who's had a really good year FIP-wise, well, and maybe he's hitting finally his ceiling, and he's finally turned the corner, in so many words. But what are you going to get for him and Joe Jimenez? It's going to be a very diminished return that isn't going to satisfy you or me or many Tigers fans out there.
So bottom line, what do you see happening today, July 31st, as the deadline approaches? Late in the afternoon, pay attention to @Detroit Podcast, @Vito Jerome on Twitter, as we'll break it all down as the events unfold, and maybe some moves will be made early on Tuesday or on Wednesday. You and I will break it all down, give our reactions, and throw out some great questions as well. What do you see happening, Vito? Tell us.
Shane Greene gets dealt, and so does Nick Castellanos. But I will warn all of you Tigers fans out there about this. The return you might get for those two dudes might not be that great. It might not be that satisfying in so many words. So don't get your hopes up for these high-level prospects, A-level prospects, and getting those guys in return for Shane Greene and Nick Castellanos. Tigers probably, in so many words also, John, would be better off packaging those two to a team in order to garner the return that all these fans in the front office themselves are desiring. In order to land that high-quality return, John, I think what you have to do is package those two dudes, those two players, to get what you want. Because right now, individually, you're not going to get high-level prospects for either Nick Castellanos or Shane Greene. Even though I think it's more likely right now that you get that return for Nick Castellanos, because he's really hit the heck out of the ball for a while now, for over a month and a half. So I think you might be able to get a better package, better return for Nick Castellanos. But for Shane Greene right now, who hasn't seen a lot of work recently and has seen some work in garbage time, I mean, teams want to see what you do. They want to see you get some innings. He hasn't been thrown out there, hasn't garnered a lot of innings recently, and because of the Tigers' woes. So because of that, that diminishes his return as well. So I think ultimately, once again, both of those guys, Greene and Castellanos, get dealt. But the guy that you're going to get more for, I think right now, is Nicholas Castellanos.
Interesting in that, what'd you make of his comments where he said, hey, I'd play first base for a team that's contending, but here with the Tigers, well, I kind of want to just do what I want to do and things like that. I found that
and
comment...
not care, not try, piss poor? That's how I would describe it as. Yeah. Maybe a little bit critical, but here's a guy...
he said that. I can't believe he said that.
Here's a guy that's supposed to be a clubhouse leader. Is that a true veteran clubhouse leader, John? When he's saying that stuff? Uttering that nonsense? No.
That's how you take it?
No, I can't describe and label you as a true clubhouse leader. Veteran presence in the clubhouse when you're uttering such nonsense. You can't be doing that, Nick C. And I don't care if you're unhappy here and you've seen the writing on the wall for a long time now that you're a lame duck and the team's looking to move you and or is looking at the very least not to extend you in the offseason. But you've been viewed as this guy that is a true clubhouse leader, as one of the veterans, few veterans on the ball club that these young players can look up to for advice. And you're saying that? So you're not leading the way for the younger generation of Tigers when you're making those comments. Once again, I label his comments as piss poor. I don't think he should be saying that as a leader of this team, whether or not he's happy or not with the status and the direction of the team moving forward.
Second half of the podcast, we're going to talk about it. The debut was made, Jake Rogers. You called for it on Twitter. You were like, why is Bobby Wilson, who's batting less than 200, batting less than 170, why is he on the team?
Batting less than 100.
Why is he on the roster? Call up Jake Rogers. That was your decree. That was your declaration on Twitter at Vito Jerome. And finally, it happened. He's currently, as we're recording, on a plane, going to head out to California to make his Major League Baseball debut. We'll talk all about it next in the second half of the podcast. We have to show love to the second sponsor of Tigers Talk, the Detroit Sports Commission. Vito, tell us all about him.
By the way, really quick, John, Tigers out there, John and I are ready to be called up to. We're ready to play if you deal with some of these guys and need some help at the Major League level. Anyways, major leaguers. We're speaking of that. The Detroit Sports Commission is a major league, high-quality A talent there with Marty Dobeck, my man, the communications specialist over there at the Detroit Sports Commission, and the director of the Detroit Sports Commission is Chris Smith, who was a guest like 2 years ago now on Two Bad Hombres on these very airwaves. Now, the Detroit Sports Commission has been bringing marquee events to our very region since 2001, which has attracted thousands and thousands of people in the city of Detroit, throughout the state of Michigan, throughout the Midwest, throughout our entire nation, and from north of the border in Canada and in other places throughout the world as well. And because of that, the Detroit Sports Commission is a marquee entity that deserves your attention and respect. So please follow the Detroit Sports Commission on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports, and make sure to check out their terrific website at DetroitSports.org.
Again, thanks to DC Sports, the Detroit Sports Commission, for sponsoring this broadcast. For us to be able to broadcast, we got to have the support of great sponsors and the supporters of this podcast. So thank you for finding it. This podcast is available anywhere on any platform that you enjoy downloading podcasts. All you got to do is search Detroit Sports Podcast. And every single Wednesday, the Tigers Talk podcast will find you. You can follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. We look forward to a great trade deadline. Vito, Jake Rogers making his debut finally. What will be the saving grace for fans in terms of watching the Tigers? What will be something that will keep us interested because of the fact that pretty much the Tigers are on pace to win one game a week for the rest of the season?
One game a week, what, 0.00% of their games moving forward.
Jake Rogers, the young call-ups, one of the guys that's considered a really skilled defender, a great catcher, and so he's going to be making his major league debut. What are your thoughts about it? What's he going to contribute? What does he have to offer, this guy, Jake Rogers, that everyone's talking about, a guy that you were clamoring for, declaring, hey, put him on the roster, I want to see him? Why?
The number 7 prospect in the Tigers farm system, according to MLB Pipeline. Also a defensive whiz. Perhaps the best defensive catcher in the minor leagues right now. So it's time to be called up, man. It's been a long time coming. And deservingly called up now to the big league level to take the spot of some guys that just weren't hitting at the major league level, such as my man, not really my man, but Bobby Wilson, hitting below 100. And I just had enough of him over the weekend, and I had to tweet that out. I saw his BA against the Mariners when he came up to bat, and I saw it was below 100. Now, I knew he was stinking up the joint at the plate, but then I saw that. His average, below 100. I was like, I got to make this decree, this declaration, as you put it, John, to get Jake Rogers called up to the big leagues. So his time had come to be called up, and he is finally going to be in Motown. And, God, the Tigers, you know what? This guy deserved it, and deserved it a long time ago, once again.
I think it's great to see somebody new at least trying to contribute, because, remember, last week was tough. Seattle got swept 4 games. They didn't look that good. It was tough to watch game in and game out. Now, to share some news, I unfortunately couldn't watch any of the series because on Friday, it was official. Dish Network cut off Fox Sports Detroit because of their ongoing negotiations, and I thought it was going to happen last week on Monday, but what in essence happened was the negotiation between Walt Disney and Dish Network broke down, and eventually speaking, Fox Sports Detroit and the regional networks go, okay, if you're not paying us for our content, don't air our content. And so as a Dish subscriber, I was not able to watch the majority of the series. Obviously, I can listen on the radio and things like that, but I did eventually miss the Tigers. And I'm like, man, throughout my time being a subscriber with Dish Network, over 18 years. So when it happens, stay tuned to this week's Doc and Jock as I lay out how I do this. But I saved a bunch of money, and whenever they cut off channels, I save a boatload of money.
And then you illegally stream things, don't you?
No.
Admit it to the masses. Come on.
No.
You didn't do it at all.
No,
Haven't.
this time,
What? Wait, time out.
one game was available free on YouTube versus the
Sure,
Angels.
against the Angels, Monday night, but how about over the weekend? Over the weekend, no illegal streaming.
No illegal
Have
streaming.
you ever illegally streamed anything in your life?
No.
Admit it right now. I want you. You're on. Come on. You're on the spot. Give me it.
Next question.
Next question, just like that. Yeah. Plead the fifth, right? No, thank you on that one.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Dish almost did you a favor. You don't have to watch the Tigers. Just track them on Twitter here and there. Okay, I know you were doing that periodically on Twitter.
Stay tuned to Doc and Jock as I lay out, because they have put out a fight, because I've lost CBS in the past, I've lost MTV, I've lost CNN, I've lost Fox News, And
you lost out. You loved watching CNN and Fox News. Just you really lost out there.
Stay tuned because
man.
each time they cut away a channel, I save money on my bill. And this time around, they put up a better fight. But I'll share the detailed story of my plan and how I executed it on this week's Doc and Jock. But I'm not able to watch the Tigers right now. And on our podcast, the Doc and Jock one, we're going to talk about the changing landscape of covering sports and the ability for these sports teams to air their product, because both sides are making claims against each other. Dish Network saying, hey, because of the high rate of pay that these athletes are getting, these regional networks want a boatload of money to put their content on to kind of recoup some money, and we can't afford to do that and to pay it. So it's an ongoing debate. We're going to break it all down this week and talk about it. But I wasn't able to watch Tigers, and I did truly miss it. I did miss watching on TV, but at the end of the day, to the degree that, I got to kind of watch other baseball, it was nice to see some other teams, too, for a minute.
Well, I bet. And then Monday night, you still saw the Tigers play the Angels on YouTube.
It was cool.
YouTube's broadcasting the Tigers and Angels. Sorry for them.
Guess how many people were watching live around the 7th inning?
What was the amount?
Take a guess.
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't even know how many they get per game, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was one of the first times I saw a baseball game on a stream. Obviously, you can watch on your phone based off the ESPN
and
stream.
MLB.TV
exactly,
and ESPN
but
app. Yeah.
On YouTube, there were 85,000 people watching.
As of the 7th inning.
Yeah. Midnight.
Well, how many Angels fans? 84? 500? I mean, come on.
Maybe. Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't say who's where. It just says that's how many people were watching live at that time.
You said 75,000 or 85, yeah.
85,000.
Yeah, 84,000 were Angels fans, once again, watching at that point because it's a late-night game. So anyways, even if the Tigers are really good, remember those games even back in the day against the Mariners, Angels out west? It's hard to tune in for the entirety of those games when they start at 10:10 and it's a weeknight. So even if the Tigers were good, it'd be tough to get the Tigers fans to watch them all the way throughout.
August might be a tough month for the Tigers in terms of victories, but at the same time, what are you going to be looking for this month? Obviously, the trade deadline, what's going to happen? The team could potentially be worse if they lose Shane Greene, if they lose Jimenez, if they lose Castellanos. Obviously, people are kind of pointing to and looking at Miguel Cabrera, and obviously he had a bounce-back game, one good performance.
But his OPS had dipped below 700. Then he set him down.
August could be really brutal.
Yeah.
What could we be looking for in terms of the Tigers? Obviously, they had a rough week, but it was good to start off this week with the victory. But what's going to happen, do you think, in the last 2 months of the season? Many people are waiting for September for the call-ups. They want to see maybe the Mannings or the Burrows or somebody potentially that could come up here and change the dynamic. Hopefully, Jake Rogers gets some hits, maybe a key home run in his first game. Hopefully, he doesn't start off. The worst thing potentially for Al Avila is not trading anybody of significance, not getting anybody, and Jake Rogers starting 0 for 25.
Oh, my God.
If he doesn't
It'd
hit,
be an indictment on him in that Justin Verlander trade. How about that
It'd be
Justin
bad.
Verlander trade and how
It'd be
bad
bad.
that looks more and more because Daz Cameron hasn't hit at AAA Toledo. Franklin Perez constantly hurt again this season. Jake Rogers really hasn't hit at AAA, by the way, too. Hitting 2-something. So can he hit at the major league level? We'll see how his game translates to the major league level. But at the very least, he has a cannon of an arm. So defensive whiz will bring those kind of intangibles to the Tigers' major league club. Now, you had brought up what's to look forward to. Well, positive on the farm is at AA and Alex Faedo. Now, courtesy of Emily Walden on Twitter, and she put out here 21 hours ago as we're recording this, leading the Eastern League in strikeouts with 122. Tigers' Alex Faedo is posting 10.4 Ks per 9 innings, has dropped his walks per 9 from 3.3 in 2018 to 1.9 this season, and has dropped his FIP, his fielding independent pitching, from 5.81, not good whatsoever last year, to 3.55 this season. So, Faedo looking sharp at AA Erie. Mize, by the way, Tigers' top prospect, bounced back with a nice performance recently, too, so that was good to see out of him. Faedo's doing well. Manning's done well. We've got all these nice young arms. But how about the major league or positional talent on the farm that can become major leaguers and hit at the major league level? Just not as much of that.
So I asked the question, are the Tigers going to win 40 games this year? What's going to be the record at the end of the year? Are they going to bottom out? Are they going to end up being the worst Tigers team, the worst American League team, the worst team of all time? Where do you think it shakes out? Or do you feel like, you know what, they're going to be somewhere in the 40s, between 40, 45. They're not going to end up being the worst team ever because it's really debatable. We don't really know what's going to happen. When you lose the talent that you have already and the team is averaging a win a week, there's a strong chance they end up in the 30s if they have another injury or things like that. So there's no guarantee this team doesn't just bottom out and only win 36, 37 games. But where do you see it shaking out? Is this the collection of talent that's the worst team in the major leagues?
Well, I thought going into this season, I thought poorly about the Tigers and really slighted them because I thought before all of these injuries, too, and what's happened this season, that the Tigers would bottom out real big and be right there with the Orioles. Well, guess what's happened? My prognostication has miraculously or magically come to fruition. Look at me. I'm a genius all of a sudden. My parents never gave me that kind of credit that I'm a genius or anybody in my years in school, but I look like it now because I really doubted the Tigers to sum it all up coming into the season. And now, look at what they have done. I mean, they have bottomed out severely. And at this point, I'm going to say they go 52-110. How about that? 52 wins.
You're going to get 22 wins
I'm about
in the
to
next
say
2
it's
months?
got to get a lot more wins. But how about 52? Well, the thing is, John, so they have 31 wins right now, correct? 31 wins after Monday night's win in Halo Land against the Angels. So can they get 21 more wins? I don't know. It's going to be tough. No, it will be tough to come by. I might be expecting a little bit too much, and especially after they lose all this talent. If they trade Shane Greene to Castellanos, maybe somebody else, including Matthew Boyd. But, 52-110 is bad as it is. That's my point here. They can't get to at least that where they're losing, and I'm going to say only 110? At this point, we're going to say only 110 because, yes, the writing is on the wall more than it's not that they're going to lose north of 110 games. So if they lose more than that, John, what are they losing is my point. Are they losing 115? Are they losing 119 again just like they did in 2003 when we thought that was the worst kind of baseball the Tigers ever could play? Could they lose 119 again?
Okay, so my question on Twitter was, will the Tigers win 10 more games? So they've already won one. Tommy Fellows writes us, he tweets at Detroit Podcast, if they trade Boyd, Shane, and Nick, they may set the new record for losses. Manny writes in, they beat the record and become the second Detroit team to hold such a record. Steve Chimenti, friend of the podcast, no, I'd rather be hanging out with you guys at Detroit Lions camp. Ed Duffy, yes. Nick, yes. Bradley Williams, no. Bruce Sucher, this is embarrassing. Same freaking players, Jimenez, Farmer, Stump, plus rookies and some average vets. For us older guys, it's hard to go through cheapness under the guise of rebuild. And so people are split. Many people think that the Tigers are going to go over, but a lot of people at the same time have reached out and said, you know what? If they do make these trades, you know what? There's an opportunity for them to bottom out and not win a bunch of games. But it's going to be great to see. And one more, Big Jim P writes in, will Vito get 10 new numbers at Detroit Lions home games?
That's easy. That's going to happen, Big Jim. But anyways, because I'm Big V. But how many wins, how many losses for the Tigers at the end of the season? I already gave my prediction, John, and you thought it was too high.
Last 2 years,
I think a lot of people would think it's too high at this point for them.
Vito, the last 2 years they finished with what record? You can look that up.
64-98.
64 wins? Oh, they're going to fall.
Not getting to that. Oh, yeah.
No, not getting to that. Oh, wow. So they're going to fall. Yeah, they're going to be probably 48 to 50. It would shake out if they win 50 games. It'd be 50 and 112. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 112 and 119 losses for this team.
Could they hit 119?
To the tie the record?
Big Vito's
no,
over under.
No.
When's the last time we've done Big Vito's over under? How about over under 119 losses, which once again they lost in that horrible season back in 03.
I think there's a greater than 80% chance they go under. I think that they're going to win more games. They're going to have an opportunity to really battle, something to play for. In September, there'll be call-ups. There'll be maybe some new energy. Maybe even just maybe Miggy gets a couple more hits here and there. So I think they will have some pride. I would be quite shocked if they ended up this season with a win total in the 30s. I would be devastatingly shocked. And it might, force some serious look at what's going on there. To only have potentially 9 more wins in 2 months, that would be brutal.
So a few more Big Vito's over-unders, okay? Quick hits here. Regarding these guys that could be traded. Shane Greene, Nick Castellanos, Matthew Boyd. Over under 45.5%, the likelihood of those guys getting dealt. Those 3 dudes.
Shane and Nick over, Boyd under.
I think I agree at this point
Very
with
fair.
Matthew Boyd because I just don't see him being dealt because of what they're looking to get in return for him. One other quick one. Big Vito's over under. Miguel Cabrera having an OPS of 750 or above. Over under 45.5% of likelihood of that happening this season, John.
I just see him declining. I mean, I don't.
He was at 699 just the other night before he hit that home run, went 2 for 4 Monday night, John.
I think he'll be maybe 740. We're just under.
So just under. Okay.
Just under.
At this point, you can't predict too much with Miguel. And maybe they just sit him down. I mean, could that be the best case scenario right now, John? What do you think? Them just sitting him down? Like, come September 1. They're not going to do it come August 1. Come September 1, he might have another injury, knowing him in his past now. How about just sitting him down from September 1 until the end of the season?
I think it would behoove them to do that. Just give him a couple weeks off. Just let him heal up a little bit and decide what's going on. It could get real bad, but it's Miguel Cabrera. He'll put some contribution, but it's got to be more. He's got to do more. He's got to do better.
Just like you expect more out of me every single
good
week. And
about
I still don't bring more. I just
it.
bring what I bring, and you know what's coming every single week.
So I'm podcasting with the Miguel Cabrera and the Jordan Zimmerman of the network here.
Somewhere in the middle. Somewhere a little bit better than that. Like in the middle of Miguel and, high-quality Tiger like Matthew Boyd. I'm in the middle of Matthew Boyd and Miguel, okay?
For those that want more positivity, Peachy Positive note of the week. Jordan Zimmerman earned his first win of the season. Congrats to him.
It came on July 29th. July 29th, John. How bad is that, man? I think I could have had a win through this or that, like before July 29th in the season, man.
Okay.
It's a long time.
And to continue the note, to end the podcast on a positive note, you said that Faedo was performing well. Anybody else that caught your attention in terms of at least doing some things that are a positive note?
Tariq, I think it's Tariq Skubal. Okay, really hard name to say. I don't know how to say it. But this guy has risen up the prospect rankings, like, enormously. I mean, he's number 5 right now, according to MLB Pipeline, I believe. So, in the top 5, maybe even a little bit better than that, among many of these pundits that scout these prospects. And people are enamored by him right now. Tariq Skubal, a guy to watch out for from the Tigers, who's at AA right now as well in the Tigers farm system.
What position?
He's a pitcher.
Okay.
He's a pitcher to watch out for. Another arm. The thing is, we don't have bats. I want to see a guy that can swing the bat, baby.
Now, I did troll a little bit, and I'll admit it. I didn't troll. I wanted to throw out more of a philosophical question, and I'll tease it now, and we'll talk about it more next week. In order, Vito, to get these positional players that have talent, I threw out that, obviously, I'd seen that Eugenio Suarez had hit his 27th home run, and I said, dang, it'd be nice to have a positional player like that had a bat that had some power. And I said, we did have him, but we made a terrible trade, and one in which, obviously, has not
We
paid
got
dividends.
Alfredo Simon.
Terrible
My
trade.
God.
Terrible trade. We need a player like Suarez. So I said, okay, would you trade a Casey Mize, your number 1 prospect in your organization, for a Suarez? And obviously, the majority of people responded and were like, what the hell, are you crazy? Okay, I did tweet that out to spark engagement and to spark debate. Now, specifically speaking, that particular move, no, I wouldn't make it. Now, remember, guys, a question is not a take. A question is a question. So you can feel free when we ask questions to just say no and your reason. You don't have to call me stupid. I know what I'm doing, okay?
He gets butthurt if you call him stupid. Too,
yeah,
so
it's ridiculous.
He cries at the end of the night. His wife has to console him in bed. John, stop crying. John.
Vito, it's not that. It's to spark engagement. And the reason why,
I get you.
And the reason why, and I told somebody, I think I told Nolan Bianchi at the Tigers game, look what I tweeted. I told somebody, hey, I just fired it up a little bit. And the reason why is, eventually speaking, you're going to have to acquire some position players. And not all of them are going to hit in the draft. So what it means is, and the question I'll throw out there for next week that we will debate and definitely take note of it is, eventually speaking, would you be willing to let go of some of these prospects for established bats in the future? Who would it be? Would it be Manning, Faedo, Burrows, Funkhauser? Would it be Tariq? Would it be somebody that potentially has some talent or has the ability? Would you let go of some of these guys for established vets? Because, look, the Tigers have a plan for a rebuild, but that doesn't mean we can't debate another plan. And another plan could be one that I threw out there, which is, hey, you have a commodity in Casey Mize, but you don't know if he's going to be a bust. You can't sit there and tell me he's going to be great. Eugenio Suarez is decent. This is a guy that's going to give you 30 home runs maybe in the future. Now, is it a fair value deal? No. But in the future, we will discuss potentially, would you let go of some of this talent to potentially get some of the replacements that you're looking for? You potentially could jumpstart a rebuild instead of 5 years of disaster, maybe only one more, if you went out and traded some of these guys and took a different philosophy. We will talk about that next week and a bunch more. We'll give our reactions to the trade deadline. We'll give our review. We'll have more of a debate regarding this rebuild and more on the next episode of Tigers Talk. I enjoyed this one, Vito.
Yes, I did dearly as well, and a lot of trade deadline chatter on this week's episode and a lot of recapping to do on next week's episode of Tigers Talk as well.
See everybody next week. Thank you so much for downloading.
Adios.